Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government correspondent for Western Wisconsin Journal, and I'm an attorney here in Hudson, Wisconsin with the Lohman Abdo Law Firm. And today we do have a guest that crosses both the legal and the political categories off, and that is Justice Daniel Kelly. Justice Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, Justice Kelly's on for more than one reason, but mainly we have an election coming up this April in which Supreme Court has a position that needs an election for, and I'll have Justice Kelly explain a little bit about that because, Justice Kelly, you were appointed to the Supreme Court back in 2016, is that right?
That's right, 2016. And so the way this works is when an individual is appointed to the Supreme Court, he stands for election in the next spring election in which no other member of the court is already on the ballot. So the rule is there can ever only be one member of the court on the ballot at a time. So in every 10-year cycle, we have 7 members. So in every 10-year cycle, 7 of those years will have Supreme Court elections. And so when I was appointed in 2016, there had already been elections scheduled for 17, 18, and 19. And so the first opportunity I've had to come to the people of Wisconsin and ask for their permission to continue serving them is now. So 2020 is nearly upon us, and here we are.
And this is for a 10-year term, so the winner of this election will be serving until the year 2030. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit then. And before you were on the bench, you had other positions, I presume. And so what I would like to know is just tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your family, and some of your qualifications for serving as justice.
Jamie, I appreciate that invitation. That might take up the rest of our half hour together because there's nothing I like talking about or in my family. But let me start here. So I came to Wisconsin almost 40 years ago. I was born in Santa Barbara. I did most of my growing up years just west of Denver. And I came out here to study at Carroll College. And so I came out one fall, beautiful fall weekend. And Jimmy, I got to tell you, I fell in love with the people of Wisconsin the very first day I was here. I'd come out a few days early because I'd never been to Wisconsin before I came out to study at Carroll. Didn't know a soul here, but I heard there was really good fishing, and I love fishing. I grew up fishing the Rockies, and I figured this would be great. Come out fishing in Wisconsin, and so arrived a few days early, and found myself at Nagawicca Lake in Delafield, and it was a fantastic fall weekend. And I know that's true because all of Wisconsin was there to enjoy it with me. And it was crowded. So all the campsites were taken, but there was a young family from Sheboygan Falls, and they were just the kindest, most generous folks. They shared their campsite with me, invited me in, and that evening they invited me to their campfire. They shared their dinner with me, and we got to talking, and soon enough, they put their 2 young children to bed, and we were up to the wee hours of the morning talking about all the things that you talk about when you first meet someone that you don't know. And they were just delightful. Next day, they took me out sailing and shared lunch together and spent pretty much the whole weekend together. And, Jamie, I came away from that thinking I had just had the most marvelous stroke of luck ever. So the very first people that I meet in Wisconsin are clearly the kindest, warmest, most welcoming people in the entire state. And I thought that's who they were. But, as I spent more time here, I realized that although they were remarkable, they were not unique. I found people like them at school and at work and church and pretty much everywhere I went around Wisconsin. Soon enough, I learned that this is really who the people of Wisconsin are. They're the people of the open hand and generous hearts. And so, so I study at Carroll College, and I meet just a wonderful young lady there, and we dated for several years, and we got married 30 years ago now, and we have 5 children, a son and 4 daughters, and they're mostly grown. So my son's all grown up, and I'm just terribly proud of him. And he's married, and so we are grandparent eligible. And so nothing on that front yet. But my wife is starting to talk about that more and more.
Well, I can just tell you it's wonderful. I have two, three, and one, and yeah, it's like starting all over again. So it's great.
Outstanding. Well, I'm glad to hear that. You oftentimes wonder, and we wondered this after we had, went from having one child to two. How am I going to love my second child as much as my first? And as it turns out, I think you kind of you grow, your heart grows as you have more children. And I've heard some kind of the same thing when you get to being a grandparent, is that there's just a whole new area of your heart that opens up. And so I'm looking forward to that.
So what part of Wisconsin? What part of Wisconsin did you raise your children in?
Yeah, so we're in Waukesha County, and we started out in Milwaukee County, and we lived in a wonderful little neighborhood off of 92nd Street, and just terrific folks there. In fact, our neighbors directly to the north of us became dear friends, and they still are. We moved out to Waukesha County about 15 years ago, but these friends have been friends with the heart, and that never changes. So we've been out here. We wanted to get a little bit more elbow room. We had a wee little house and a growing family, and we started pouring out. I think and not really quite fitting in that little place, and so we came out this direction to get a little bit more space. And we've loved being out here. It's beautiful. We're on the edge of the Kettle Moraine State Forest, and this is just fantastic. First, actually, when we first moved out here, I was standing on the driveway between our house and the barn, and a beautiful summer night. There's no street lights out here, and I was looking up at the sky, and you just see all the stars and the Milky Way painted across that black expanse. And I looked around me, and I thought, oh my Lord, what have I done? I'm living in the middle of nowhere. And it truly felt that way. And then, flash forward about 10 years, I'm standing in the same spot, another beautiful summer evening, and I'm looking around, and I I can see my neighbor's house right over there. I don't know, maybe need a little bit more room. So it's kind of fun how perceptions change. Nothing else has changed out here. We don't have new neighbors, but you kind of get used to having a little bit more room around you, and being a little bit more of a rural sensibility.
You mentioned your 5 children are mostly grown. Do you still have any in high school?
We have one. She's 13 years old. So we have, so my daughters are 22, 20, 18, and then 13. So a little bit of a gap between number 4 and number 5. But she's quite the spark plug, and she keeps us energized.
Any of those children go to Carroll College then? They
do. So my daughter Abigail and my daughter Rachel are both at Carroll, and we've been careful, as my folks did for me. They never put their thumb on the scale on what I should choose as my path in life. They left that up to me. They figured, we're going to do the best we can to raise you, and then and part of that part of raising a child is, of course, teaching them how to make wise decisions. And so then when it came time to make my decisions on the path I would take, they just kind of took their hands off to see what I would do. And we try to do the same thing with our children. And so we didn't put a thumb on the scale on where they would choose to go to school. But I secretly was kind of happy that they decided to go out to Carroll as well.
So you went to Carroll for undergrad. Where'd you go to law school?
Regent University out in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And here, Virginia Beach is a lovely city. I wouldn't know too much about that because I loved, so I took 2 years between college and law school. And so when I got out there, I couldn't wait to get to my studies. And I loved being in law school. And so I really only knew the path between the apartment and the law school. and that was about it. So I've had a chance to go back and visit Virginia Beach a few times in the last number of years, and truly is a lovely area.
It is, yes. We've vacationed there too, and yep, it's great to get in the water and everything. So after law school, what's your experience? Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about what you did before getting on the bench then?
Yeah, so this is my experience has really turned out in a way that I guess I kind of hoped it would. I have an interest in a whole lot of different things, and I kind of wanted my practice to follow that, to be a broad-based practice, and so it has been. And I've clerked both on the Wisconsin Court of Appeals and the United States Court of Federal Claims Office of Special Masters out in D.C. So I've done that. I've been defense counsel. I've been a special prosecutor. I've spent most of my career in commercial litigation, handling a really, really broad array of cases. I've litigated contract issues, real estate, UCC, professional responsibility, administrative law, constitutional law, and a host of other subjects in the law. And so I've really enjoyed a very broad experience over the 20 years or so before I came to the court. And a lot of that was spent at one of the largest and oldest law firms in the state of Wisconsin. But I've also started my own firm with a good friend, and we built that up, and he's doing a great job with it now. So in the private sector, the public sector, started a business, worked in an established law firm over 100 years old, and just a large number of areas of the law, and it has been a delight. And I found that that's really been actually exceptionally helpful as I've come to the Supreme Court. So one of the responsibilities we have in deciding a case is making sure that the decisions that we come to create as few ripples in the law as possible, right? So our first responsibility is to get to the correct result, the one that is required by the law. But we need to be really careful in the way that we draft our opinions to make sure that they have as few unintended consequences as possible. So when I think about writing an opinion, I have this kind of picture in my mind of a very, very long bookshelf full of the laws of Wisconsin. And we generally take cases because there is an area of the law that has not received a definitive treatment from the Supreme Court before, and so it's a novel question. And so when we're writing the opinion, I envision taking that opinion and putting it on that bookshelf, and I want to make sure that it slips right into the slot where it belongs, and it doesn't disturb anything around it, doesn't knock any of the other books off the shelf, and doesn't create any confusion. So the idea is that we have a clear and precise statement of what the law is, what the law requires in this kind of circumstance, and we don't go changing any of the laws that might be around it. So we make sure that it's precise and clear and to the point. And I think having the broad experience that I do helps me to do that well, because you have a better sense of what the parameters of the law are. If you've had a broad experience.
All right. So, yeah, you kind of slipped into qualifications there, and I appreciate that, moving the interview along. But with that experience, I just wondered, did you have judicial experience prior to Governor Walker appointing you?
I did not.
Okay.
So I went right from private practice to the Supreme Court. But I've been a close watcher of the court and participant in the court for a very long time. So, the cases that I took, oftentimes they were dealt with at the circuit court, the trial court level. But one of the areas in which I concentrated when I was in practice was appellate advocacy. So I've argued, prior to coming to the court, I'd argued several cases before the Wisconsin Supreme Court. I'd argued cases, numerous cases in the courts of appeals and courts of appeals around the country, both state and federal. And so the nature of an appellate tribunal was very familiar to me for a long time before coming to the court. And so there was really not as large of a transition as you might expect, going from doing appellate advocacy in front of the Supreme Court and courts of appeals to switching to the other side of the bench. So all of that appellate experience, I think, it prepared me well to make that transition.
So when you were a litigator, what was your private practice balance between state court and federal court? Was it 70-30, 60-20?
Yeah, it kind of fluctuated over time. So there were periods of time where I was doing virtually nothing but federal cases around the country, and there were times where I was doing virtually nothing but state cases here in Wisconsin. I'd say that over the 20 years or so that I've been practicing in state and federal courts, probably the majority of that has been in state courts in Wisconsin.
And were you a member of any bar organizations besides the Wisconsin State Bar?
Well, there's the Seventh Circuit Bar, the United States Supreme Court Bar, the bars of the different districts that I practiced in. For a while, I was a participant in an Inn of Court, which was a wonderful experience. So one of the let me just back up for just a second. Jamie, I knew when I was in seventh grade that I wanted to be a lawyer, and that never changed. So I've had a love of the law as a thing for a very, very long time. It's not just a job. It's not just a practice. It's not just something to do. I've loved the law and what it represents and the security that it brings to society and the foundation that it creates for people to interact with each other peacefully and prosperously. And just as a foundational matter, I think the rule of law is just exceedingly important. And so when I get an opportunity to get together with other lawyers who have a similar love of the law, who understand that its fundamental nature and role that it plays in our society, and you get together and you talk about the intellectual and the scholastic aspect of the law, I find that delightful. And the Inn of Court was like that. So it was a nice combination of looking at the law as a subject of intellectual inquiry, but also as it is actually in practice. And so, and that's the way that I've interacted with the law ever since I graduated law school. It has been an object that I have an exceptional amount of respect for because of the role that it plays. And I understand how important it is to allowing people to interact with each other peacefully and prosperously. And so it has been a pleasure to pursue that and to strengthen the rule of law in the many different roles that I've had over the years. And now in this role, frankly, Jamie, this has been the honor of a lifetime to serve the people of Wisconsin on their Supreme Court in, again, protecting and advancing the rule of law.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit? You mentioned loving the law and everything and having a legal philosophy. What has been your judicial philosophy, and has it changed since you've become appointed?
Yeah, it's been the same as it has always been. This is the judicial philosophy I've had has actually itself been a matter of deep study for me for the last couple of decades. So it's this. It's based on the relationship between the people of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Constitution, and the role of the Supreme Court Justice. So my understanding is that all of the authority, all of it, to create and maintain governments belongs to the people of Wisconsin. It all belongs to them. And they don't give it away. They don't sell it. They don't alienate it. They simply lend it to those in government to exercise on their behalf. And the way they express that loan is through the Constitution that they created and maintain even to this day. And so I understand that my responsibility to them is described in the Constitution. And so when I go there to take a look at what our responsibilities are, I see that there's a very clear distinction between what the legislature does and what the judiciary does. We don't make the law. We don't decide what the law ought to be. We don't decide what the law ought not to be. We don't play favorites with the law. All we do is we take that work that the legislature did, we apply it to the case in front of us, so long as it's consistent with the Constitution as it's maintained by the people of Wisconsin, and then we come to our judgment in the case. And it's really, Jamie, it's a pretty humble role. You've got to be comfortable with the idea that we're not there to decide what policy should be for the state of Wisconsin. We're not there to decide what the law ought to be. We are simply there to apply it to the case in front of us as it's written, as it's written. And if we do that, then we're faithful to the Constitution. And if we're faithful to the Constitution, then we're faithful to the people of Wisconsin. And ultimately, that's the primary responsibility of a Supreme Court justice, is to be responsible to those whose authority he is exercising on their behalf. And so, I like to think of it as, and it's actually true. I've got a whole bunch of bosses, and my responsibility is to be answerable to them. I was at a church service, a Christmas service, almost a year ago, and it wasn't our normal church, our regular church. It was my wife knew the pastor's wife, and they'd invited us out and invited other office holders to participate with them as well. And after the service, I was in the foyer talking with some of the folks there, and the pastor came up to greet me, and he said, "Justice Kelly, I want to thank you for being out here in the service with us today. It's great to have someone so important be a part of our service." And when he said that about importance, my heart just dropped. I said, "You know what? Can we rewind this conversation just a little bit?" I said, "Pastor, I've often thought that where you rank is inversely proportional to the number of bosses that you have. So the more bosses you have, the lower you rank. Fewer bosses you have, the higher you rank." So, "Pastor, how many bosses do you have?" And he said, "About one." I said, "Yeah, I've got 6 million. So between you and me, you outrank me by a whole heck of a lot." And that's the truth of the matter, Jamie. When I walk into a room and I've got the robe on, I am at the bottom of the heap everywhere I go, because every person that I meet when I'm wearing that robe is one of my bosses. And so my responsibility is to be faithful to them. And so I often put it this way: I'm a servant of the law and a servant of the people. And I think that expresses what my judicial philosophy is. It's a responsibility to them to exercise the authority of the Supreme Court the way that they have asked me to, which is simply applying the law without regard to my personal preferences, but just as the legislature has created it.
And so I understand your judicial philosophy, and I think our audience has a good sense of that now. But a lot of people use the analogy that sometimes judges or justices are also referees, in the sense of it's not that you make the law, but that you have to then interpret how it's to be applied and whether or not it's being applied correctly. Many times the role of the executive branch is to carry out the law, and so you're called upon many times to rule whether or not that power is being abused by another branch of government. So how do you feel about that? Maybe the black robe should be black and white stripes.
That would work too. That's in the analogy to referee. I think that works really well. Chief Justice John Roberts described it as just calling balls and strikes, right?
Right.
And I think that's a great picture, and partly because it describes the humble role that we play, but also because it describes how important it is that we not make the law. So in a baseball game, the pitcher's got to know where to throw the ball, right? So if he wants a strike, he knows where to throw a strike, and if he wants to try to get the batter to swing with something he's never going to connect with, he knows where to throw it. But he's got to depend on the understanding that his role is not to decide where he should have thrown the ball. It's just to decide, where did you throw the ball, right? So he says there's the strike zone, and I'm just going to watch the ball and I'm going to see where it comes, and I'm going to call it a strike or not a strike, depending on where it's thrown. Now, I'm not going to shift the strike zone around because I think the strike zone ought to be somewhere else. I'm not going to shift it around because I think he should have thrown a strike here instead of a ball. He just takes what comes and he says what it is. And we do the same thing. We don't tell the legislature what laws they should adopt or shouldn't adopt. We just take the laws as they come, and we say, does that comply with the Constitution, or does it not? That is it a strike, or is it a ball? And then how does that apply to the case in front of us?
You mentioned the Constitution, and I had asked you off camera prior to start, what are your issues in the campaign? And you really didn't have a whole laundry list, but you started with fidelity to the Constitution, and I wanted you to just talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, so it really is that, and it really is that simple. So our responsibility is to apply all of the terms of the Constitution with neither fear nor favor for any party, regardless of who that party might be. So it is actually our responsibility not to have issues, which seems a little odd. We hear political debates all the time, and everybody's talking about what their favorite cause is going to be, what constituency they want to serve, what laws they either might like or not like. But then when you get to a judicial election, all the rules change. We don't have causes that we champion on the court. We're not supposed to, at least. We're not supposed to have favorites between the laws. We don't have policies that we think that should be adopted for the state of Wisconsin, and we're not supposed to have any thoughts on what laws or policies ought not to be adopted. Our responsibility is simply fidelity to the Constitution, every single part of it, and we apply that fairly and justly according to the terms of that document as it's been adopted and maintained by the people of Wisconsin. As it turns out, not everyone agrees with that. There are some who believe in this idea of a living constitution, and that the court is supposed to update it from time to time to keep pace with the development in society. And I think that is a complete lack of faithfulness to the Wisconsin Constitution and to the people who maintain it. So the Constitution does need to be updated from time to time, but you know what? The Constitution provides for the way that's done. And as it turns out, what the people of Wisconsin have decided is that it's between them and the legislature to change the Constitution when it needs to be changed. They've not asked us to be any part of that process. Right? So you change the Constitution by passing an amendment in 2 consecutive legislatures and then putting it before the people of Wisconsin for a vote. In no part of that process is the court involved. People of Wisconsin have not asked us to be a part of changing their Constitution. And so for those who would come to the court and try to change the Constitution because they think they have a better understanding of what it ought to be, they're setting themselves at odds with their bosses, with the people of Wisconsin. And I think that's entirely inappropriate.
All right, we just have 1 minute left, and I wanted to give you an opportunity because the other 2 candidates that we've interviewed have mentioned the issue of recusal from certain types of cases for a justice to recuse themselves, and that whether or not the current rule is sufficient. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that, if you would.
Sure. So recusal is a difficult issue. So essentially, when a justice is unable to fulfill the responsibilities of his office, he has an obligation, an ethical and professional responsibility to recuse himself from considering that case. So here's what our responsibility is. It is to impartially apply the law to the case in front of us. And if there is an outside consideration that interferes with that person's ability to do that, then he can't sit on the case. So we've had recusal rules in the state of Wisconsin for a very long time. And I think they've been serviceable. Is it possible to improve them? That's always possible. And from time to time, people will take a look at that and suggest some changes. We haven't seen any yet that would actually improve the situation without introducing lots of opportunities for mischief. But we're always open to looking for opportunities to ensure that our recusal rules reflect the profound responsibility and obligation that a Supreme Court justice has to faithfully discharge his duties with respect to the Constitution and the people of Wisconsin. And so perhaps those will come up in the future, and we'll take a good hard look at them. And if there is merit and value to them, we'll include that. And because I think it is of fundamental importance that the people of Wisconsin are confident that their justices on the Supreme Court are deciding their cases based on nothing but the law. No outside considerations, just the law.
Well, on that note, we're going to have to end it. The half hour we had kind of flew by. I wanted to give you a chance. Do you have a website that folks could go to learn more about you and your campaign?
I do, and thanks for asking, Jamie. It's justicedanielkelly.com. That's justicedanielkelly.com. And we welcome you there at our website. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Apparently my name's a little too long for that. So on Facebook and Twitter, we are Justice Dan Kelly. So Justice Dan Kelly there, and justicedanielkelly.com for our website. And I'll look forward to, thanks so much for this opportunity, Jamie. I really appreciate this. And I'm looking forward to continuing with this conversation with all my bosses across the state.
Right. Well, very good. And thank you for being on the show. And I look forward to seeing you if you're, the primary, as we're telling voters, is in mid-February, February 17th, I believe. The 18th, all right, the third Tuesday in February. And then the first Tuesday in April is the general election. And hopefully, maybe we'll see you up this way in St. Croix County.
I would look forward to that.
All right. Well, thank you. And I want to thank our viewers for being with us for another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, and keep watching.